Well, welcome to Talk with John Michael for today, May the 21st. I can't believe we're almost to the end of May, but we are pleased to welcome you, and I am always thrilled to welcome my good friend John Michael Lander and his amazing guest today, Michael Skinner. So I will turn it over to you, John Michael. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Becky. I am so excited. And I cannot tell you, I've been anticipating this for a long time, Michael. This is like incredible. But I'm going to just read a little brief thing about you, and you can add to it or you can say, hey. But Michael Skinner, who was an award-winning educator, advocate, artist, and musician dedicated to prompting hope, healing, and help for those impacted by trauma, abuse, or mental health concerns through the use of the creative arts, education, and advocacy. Michael will share how he has turned the experience of horrific childhood sexual abuse into a prolific career advocating on behalf of trauma survivors. Would you like to
Thank
add
you.
anything else onto that?
Uh, Thank you. It wasn't a road. It wasn't in my business plan, a roadmap. It just happened organically. And then I wanted to go back to touring as a musician, but for some reason, the universe, higher power, whatever one's belief system, kept pulling me back to be an advocate. So here I am, and I'm grateful because it's been a great journey. It's been a hard journey. It hasn't been easy, but I've just met so many amazing people and wonderful organizations all over, and I'm grateful for that for the opportunity. I feel blessed with that because, and I'm grateful to be on this podcast today because I know there's hundreds of others who are also doing great work out there. So thank you.
Oh, we are thoroughly honored to have you here. And, listening to your music, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk as we go through today how your music has healed and helped yourself and other survivors. And this whole myth that music is not helping in therapy situations, we're going to address that as well. And I'm just so excited because there's some people here that are listening that I just saw that I'm excited that you're going to get to meet. So I hope they have some questions for you as well. But let's start this off from the very beginning. Talk, if you can, as much as you feel comfortable about, um, a little bit about your background, as a survivor and then going into music. I know that the story of your creating that band when you were like 14 is just amazing, but just as much as you want to share with us.
Well, I'm in New Hampshire, but if you, as I get talking, you'll hear the accent. I was born in Boston. I lived there and in Cambridge till the age of 6 years old, then moved out to the suburbs of Billerica, Massachusetts, which was only like 18, 20 miles outside of the city. So um, that is my background. That's where I grew up. And unfortunately, my mother was a stay-at-home mom. My father was a hard worker. They provided. We lived in a modest ranch in Billerica. I was the oldest of five siblings. Um, but the reason I'm here today, John Michael and Becky, is they were both pedophiles, both of them. So they both abused me. And it wasn't until many years later when I was asked to speak at a trafficking conference that I asked one of the presenters, said, "Why are you asking me to present at a trafficking conference?" And she said to me, "Michael, you were trafficked as a child." So here I am as an adult. I never thought of the fact that my parents brought me to other homes, was pawned off to other adults. There were other children there. And also, my mother was part of a congregational church, and this was in an affluent town of New Hampshire. And I was brought to that church or to different homes. And again, it was some of the parishioners and the pastor of that congregational church. Not the whole church, but there were several of them. And, obviously, with the trauma details, it's hard to remember how, but there was myself and other children. So that was my background. So that was hard. So some details are crystal clear on the abuse. Some are just the memories, the feelings. So I suspect it was happening when I didn't have the language skills because of the feelings and I've done a lot of healing on this and talked and shared. So any question you want to ask me, I'll answer, because my whole point to this is I was silent on this till the age of 39. It came back to haunt me in the terms of the flashbacks and everything else, which I'd been for years suppressing, repressing, and staying in denial. And my drug of addiction was workaholism. I was an extreme workaholic. So I just kept busy. As a touring musician, that was the perfect outlet to be on the road, just busy, busy, busy. And then I went into the music business. Same thing, traveling up and down the East Coast as far Midwest as Chicago and into Canada. So I was representing bands and booking them. I had my own company, was very successful. But then all those snippets, I used to call them, I used to think of them as Polaroid snapshots. Obviously, I'm 71, so I remember, the Polaroid snapshots. Those little images would crop into my head, and I would do everything to stuff them down because they would knock the wind out of my sails. So I was the workaholic. When I was younger, I drank too much. I started drinking, 9 and 10 years old because my parents had these parties, and I'd just go out and I'd start drinking whatever's there. And by the time I was 12, I was drinking a couple beers. I didn't like it, but then as I get into the teenagers, I drank too much. But finally, 19 and 20, I stopped that. To I focused more on the music to healing and just staying busy. But it came back to me at the age of 39. And I'm going to stop from it if there's a question or questions, because I don't want to just keep going on this, but I'll go wherever you want with this. So
This is brilliant. I thank you so much for your transparency. There are some questions that have popped up in my head real quick. When you said that you just stopped drinking, now at that time when you made that choice or that decision, had music become so important at that point that was that what was helping you, or what was the point that you just like? Because I know that in my situation, I was really afraid of alcohol because my father was an alcoholic. And I was afraid of drugs because I thought I had to be in control the whole time. So even when I was in Hollywood and you go to those parties and the cocaine is laid out on the coffee, the coffee table, that was not what I was interested in. And I would walk away. And I never had that desire. And everyone keeps saying, well, why didn't you do drugs or alcohol? And I I just didn't. I chose not to, or I guess I equated it. Is that something that you did, or was music so important that and powerful that it just took you away?
the music just it was powerful, but there's a part of my life that I'm not happy about. I've learned to forgive myself because we do things to survive. My father was also the alcoholic, the brutal, raging alcoholic. He died of his alcoholism at the age of 53, cirrhosis of the liver. But he was a hard worker, and did plumbing, electrical work, and he was the head of a maintenance crew that took care of the brownstone buildings in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It was owned by the second largest real estate holding company in Cambridge after Harvard University. So there was a lot of them. But he was also a leg breaker. He was the person that hurt people, and he hurt me all the time. So I was always being beaten up by the bullies. Um, and then there was a turning point. Three bullies older beat the living crap out of me when I was in the third grade, and I went home and he was there, and he proceeded to beat me even worse and gave me a choice: go back and face them, and that's where I learned I did go back and face them, and I used my lunchbox to beat them. And I learned that bullies were the biggest cowards. From that point on, John Michael, I did not let anyone touch me, say anything. So I became very proficient at fighting, and I stood up for other people. I stood up for my siblings. If I saw bullies picking on someone in school, if I wasn't, I I became a raging holic with fighting. I was actually asked when I was 18 and 19 by a former professional fighter who is now a trainer and a manager. He wanted me to go professional. He thought I could be the next heavyweight champion of the world with my rage, my power, and his training me to be a boxer. So at that point, I started weighing, do I do that? Or do I go? So I focused on the music. And in terms of the drinking, I had hurt some people, but I'd sent them to the hospital, but I was taking on people two and three at a time. So these were not, they were bikers, they were drug dealers. So it wasn't, that didn't give me the right. I'm not excusing my behavior. It's just, if I was being threatened or someone said something to me, I was more fear. It was that fear of my father kicking the crap out of me that drove me.
Hmm.
Plus, I didn't want to be hurt. I didn't, I don't like confrontation any more than the next person, but I could just rise up to it. So it was that, like I said, around 19, I said, this isn't good. I have to stop. I have to and get back to music. I can't keep doing this because I actually took off some time from music and it was like between 18 and 19, I went off the rails. I never, I never did drugs. And people find that hard to believe. But like you were saying, the cocaine, the drugs were everywhere, whether as a
Right.
musician or later on in the music business, it was always there. I didn't want that controlling me, and I didn't want the alcohol controlling me anymore. So I stopped. I can still have a beer, but I generally have like 2 beers per month now, but I needed to stop to get my life back on track. And when I did that, that's when the band, we started even doing more. And that's when myself and the bass player met up with another musician. That then we went over to Great Britain to tour for 2 years. So there was this series of things. My other thing that I was not happy about in my younger years was, was fighting alcohol and promiscuity. I just didn't know. I didn't know back then to ask for a hug. And learning later on trauma and abuse and those of us who were sexually abused, I'm gonna bet 99% of the my partners were also trauma survivors. We were just That's how we knew to connect. But then, you push them away or they're pushing me away, and then you go off on your merry way. And we just didn't know any better. I didn't know any better. I know better now because of learning about trauma's impact on the mind, the body, and the spirit.
Well, there are some comments in the chat that I just want to share with you. We have Hawa, and I might say that wrong, Abdullah, who is a PhD student in China and has given their email address. I don't know if that's something that they want you to have or not. There is another one here that says, thank you for sharing your parts of your story. I'm sorry that you have to be a survivor sibling. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you have to be a survivor sibling with me, but I'm grateful to have such a strong fighter on our side. How was it for you that someone put the label of trafficking on you? Um, do you think that the labeling others is helpful or harmful, and why?
I don't like the labeling in the mental health arena. I I I detest the label of borderline personality disorder because most of the folks are trauma or abuse survivors. Um, Trafficking survivors, that doesn't bother me, but how did it feel? I had done another conference for this person and group at I spoke at the National Press Club in Washington. I thought, wow, how the heck did I get here? So I thought that was very cool. So when I was asked to present at this conference that was being held at Georgetown University, and the State Department and United Nations were part of this, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. But again, why? But when Christine said to me, Michael, you were trafficked, I heard the first few words of the sentence, John Michael, and then I just spaced out. I dissociated because it was like a sucker punch to the gut.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Maybe I'm early 40s at that point in my life, and to have someone now at this point in my life saying this to me, this was like earth shattering, but she was right. I just never thought of it. I I can't speak for other survivors, but I know for myself and from fellow friends survivors, we minimize, we don't compare. I I would think of trafficking, the drug cartels, the organized crime that are putting women and children and males into prostitution and stuff. I don't think that's what was done. I can't remember. Was money exchanged? What was, I don't know. But that's how I saw trafficking. And I just thought, how horrible, what these people have to go through. I just never equated that to me. I,
No, I hear you. I hear you, and I understand that. And in my situation, it's kind of similar in that fact that I was advised that I was trafficked, and I had a hard time with that because that meant that my parents were at the center of it. And I was not really ready to do that. I was not ready to say, my parents might have been a part of this. And I think I held that for a long time until I started to realize how it all was played out. And, my mom was. But it's that whole thing about no, parents don't do that. We don't want to believe that. They're supposed to protect us. They're supposed to be this. And to realize that that wasn't true, then what else wasn't true? That's what I struggled with, you know. And
everything,
go ahead.
everything is a lie.
Yeah.
Well, everything was a lie. Um, people are married and they're doing these horrible. I don't pass moral judgment on anyone. What goes on between two consenting adults.
Right.
There's the key word, consenting adults. But when you start involving children or teenagers, it's like, no, you've crossed the line. I have, no, that's wrong. Um,
Yeah,
and
and involving your own child.
yeah,
That's was a really big thing for me to understand, and affected everything. It affected it, then it's was that snowball effect. It affected every relationship that I had. Did I or were they lies? And everything was became like I didn't know what was up or down for the longest time. And I want to talk about how music helped in healing you as a person, and how did it help the trauma, because we have I told you about a young man that I was talking to who was told that music is not therapeutic. And I would love to hear your aspect, because we talked about this, you and I did, and how drumming is a part of using the whole body. And I know that this young man is a drummer as well, which is really kind of cool. And I just wanted to have you share with that.
well, for me, initially, it was just as a listener. My
Hmm.
parents, as twisted as they were, my mother had a beautiful singing voice. She sang in the choir, but they both had an incredible record collection, and then the radio was always playing. So whether I was hearing Sam Cooke, Johnny Mathis, Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, the Everly Brothers, they all, that was an escape for me. Then hearing on the radio, hearing Dusty Springfield and Petula Clark. Petula Clark was singing downtown to me. I knew it. I'd say, and then I had a crush on her and Dusty Springfield. I'm a little kid, but they were singing to me. Leslie Gore, when she was singing "You Don't Own Me," I'm like, I'm singing and I'm thinking she's singing for me that my parents don't own me. So it was the love of listening that would just take me away. So when we moved to Billerica, I moved out of the projects of Cambridge to the Billerica. There was fields, there was woods. I could go over there with my transistor radio and just listen. Of course, now I was just loved rock and roll. Chuck Berry,
Oh,
you know, uh, Del Shannon, Runaway. I mean, good. I loved all the rock and roll stuff, the early stuff, and then, but I had my mind set. So the music was it was just listening. It just took me away. It was an escapism, and I loved it. It was like, wow, how do they sing like that? How do they play the instruments? This was like mind-boggling. And then, and this was key because I always wanted to go into the military. I had my mind set on going to West Point, graduating from that, going into the Rangers, and then going to Green Beret. Now, I wanted to come back so skilled and proficient as a warrior, I wanted to then use those skills to protect children. And I was going to start with my parents. I was going to, this is what I was thinking at 8 and 9 years old. And then I saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. I'm 9 years old. In a few months, I'd turn 10, and that was transformative. It was like, oh my gosh, oh my, I want to do that. I want to play and I did something that I normally just kept to myself. I shout out, I want to be like them. I want to play the guitar and sing. And then my father's adjectives always had the F bomb in front of it. I'm
Hmm.
stupid, worthless, lazy. And I remember my mother just looking at me, who do you think you are? And that just crushed me. I couldn't sink into the couch deep enough. But a few months later, what I realized, John Michael, I was always tapping along to the songs on the counter, on the radio, in the woods, on my knees if I'm listening. And I realized, haha, I can be a drummer because I was anticipating the drum roll. So I taught myself to play the drums. And by the age of 12, I was able to join the local neighborhood band. I borrowed a friend's drum set. I didn't have a drum set at the time. And we started playing at teen centers, junior high dances, friends' parties, outdoor events, and we're getting paid for it. So now the skills I didn't know back then that drumming was a great way to get rid of angst and rage and all that. But I'm using all four parts of it was just, but then I'm working with a band. I'm learning how to work with other musicians. By the time I was 15 and 16, I'm doing this professionally in nightclubs and bars. Some of the bars, were horrible places, but I didn't care. I just wanted to play. But the other piece to the not only was the music helping me to heal and learn to be a musician, perfecting my craft, still hearing music, but this brought me into where would be practicing my friends' home, my fellow musicians, parents that were loving, that were caring, that were kind to their kids, that would ask me, Michael, how was your day today? And this is like, I want to do this. This was transformative that they were loving parents. I didn't know that. My parents never asked anything that asked me, how was your day? This was like a foreign language to me, and I was just a sponge sucking all that in. So the music, the listening, learning to play, being part of a band, I had no self-worth, John Michael. I was lower than low. I was a shame-based child, but now I had people saying to me, "You're a good drummer. I like the band." So it was just building me up. We're getting paid to play. That meant that we were good, and the band was
Right.
good. And we started winning battle of the bands. And like I said, I'm 15 and 16. We were considered a professional band. We were that good. So it just it
So
feel like a human being.
yeah, yeah. And so I think what I'm hearing, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this act of music, the drumming, this everything was therapeutic in the sense that it removed you from this Green Beret dream of violence into this world that was healing you. Is it okay to say that?
Absolutely, because I was born into this world for whatever the reason. I wanted to be a creative artist.
Hmm.
I did not want to fight any. I'm just as afraid as the next person. I truly am, but I've learned to stick up for myself. I went into the martial arts to learn to channel that rage, to not to not go down the wrong path. I just wanted to be a musician. That was my favorite time. That's how that gave me an identity. Later on, becoming a dad was a powerful, transformative moment. But it was musician. I was a musician. That's all I wanted to be was a musician. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want. I just wanted to be. And I'm still grateful. I don't gig like I used to, but I'm still a musician. I made a
Yeah.
living as a musician, and darn it, I'm proud of that. I'm
Oh, I'm proud of you for it too, because you've taken such a horrific situation and you found a way into a positive healing aspect, which was through music. And I keep pushing that today because I think it's so important. And I just had this one really quick question. When you're drumming or you're playing and you're just jamming, is that like a meditative state for you?
it's the band we had in England trained that we were a hard rock band, but we would come off the stage because one, you're connecting with the fellow musicians. There's this energy, and then you're connecting with the crowd, and you're feeding off of that, and it's back and forth. And I remember we had some gigs, and we were drained, and would forgive me, but would say to us, "My God, that was like we just had sex."
Wow.
That's how powerful it was. And I'm not trying to be crude, but when you are in the part of lovemaking, that's a beautiful experience. Performing music, and when you're connecting with the crowd and your fellow musicians, it's like it's a spiritual high. It's just, I want more of this. That's a great drug. You know,
Yeah, yeah. It's like that vibration is taking you so high.
yeah.
I do want to share something in here. Alex is sharing something he says about lyrics. He says, a punk band that I loved had these lyrics. I will believe in dragons for as long as I run with dragons. To be and stay youthful, you have to believe in fantasy and run with it. So it's funny because I remember one of our last talks, you were talking about some hard rock bands and how their lyrics are really almost metaphysical, almost like a transparency of helping people. If people would just listen to these lyrics, they would. Can you give an example besides? Then we're going to talk about your lyrics.
Well, case in point, I loved Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, and Black Sabbath and a gazillion others, but Black Sabbath had this bad connotation, early in the early years, the press was, they're thinking they're evil. You listen to War Pigs. I mean, they were ahead of the curve. They were talking about the industrial military complex and the greed and the politicians sending young people off to die and the corruption of that. They, them and other bands had so I loved being transformed, but I also loved, listening to James Taylor and all the rest of it. But it was the hard rock stuff when I was that was just propelling me, and I loved listening to lyrics. I want to hear what a song is saying, whether it's short and to the point or whether it's this long story. Bruce Springsteen tells stories in his music. So do many of the hard rock bands, the Beatles and others. There's certain, well-known groups that they have the stature, but there's also lesser known groups that were doing the same darn thing that I was listening to, and it was the music and the lyrics. I wanted to, so if I couldn't understand, I'd go to the music store and try to find the sheet music, and sometimes they didn't have the the lyrics right, because sometimes the musicians are slurring their words. But yeah, the lyrics, I love the story that was being paired with the music. So.
Now, just a quick question on that. The difference between the lyrics and some of this rough, hard music, what can that do to a person's mind? You know what I mean?
For me, it just it touched me, and then I see with other people, the gentleman asking on the punk. I was in touring England in '76 and '77 when the punk explosion took off. So we're playing in a college or university one month. We go back several months later, and the crowd that was watching us had hair down to here. Now it's all cut up to here, and it gets. But the punk bands, they were saying that there was an energy. They were angry at the system. They were angry. It was just a way of voicing their frustration. Now, there are some that are crude, rude, and unacceptable, and that's true
Right.
with some rock bands. I don't like it. I don't like it. But if you have a message and you're saying something, more power to you. So the punk bands were doing something else. They were just rebelling. Did I like all of them? No, but some of them I truly respected the energy and what they were trying to say, what they
So if
were
I'm hearing
saying.
this,
Not
yeah. So what I'm hearing is basically saying that the music itself is reflecting the feelings that were going on, addressing with the words when it's really well orchestrated,
right, right,
right?
right.
And instead of just being expose or something trying to get someone's attention because I'm going to throw this F bomb here or this, and it doesn't really make a sense of what the story is telling.
Yeah, yeah. So the cheapest songs where it's just about meeting the girl, using them, and all the rest of it. I have. and I want to shake him and say, "Give me a break. Come on. You've written a good song here. Can you put some meaningful lyrics to it?" This sounds like a 14-year-old wrote it.
Right, right, right. All right, so now let's talk about your music. What is one of your favorite songs you've written that addresses trauma, abuse, and mental health?
Oh boy. So walk with me
Mhm.
because I'm that's an angry song. Now I do it acoustically, but on Train of Tears, I had fellow musicians help me out, and I'm pounding on the drums. But these were musicians I used to represent when I was in the music business. They helped take that song to a different level, but it was the lyrics. I'm just, you know, walk with me, step into my shoes. You have no idea. You have not been in. So that for addressing the mental health piece of it and the stigma and learning what has gone on in our lives. Can you just take a moment and listen to me? Listen
Mm,
to
mm,
listen to the folks you're supposedly trying to help with all these mental health diagnoses. In terms of, I think with the trauma and abuse, because there is a theme throughout my life, and since '93 is I am angry at society. I look at it as I call it the religion of the three monkeys: see no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil. And I think most of the world is still stuck in cognitive dissonance. They don't want to look at it. So even as something with brush away your tears, I have it right. So the chorus is brush away the tears from your eyes, my child. The world don't want to see you cry. Brush away the tears from your eyes, my child. The world don't want to hear you cry. They don't want to see you cry. They don't want to hear you cry. But at the end, because I always there's hope, so I can
mhm.
voice my anger. But at the end, the song calms down, and I write, "Someday the world will understand, and then they'll hold out their hand. Till then, you must be strong and find a way to carry on."
Wow, I just got
So,
chills. Yeah,
so it's directed at the child and the adult survivor, that you're strong inside, and you're going to have to find a way to navigate this because, unfortunately, most of the world does not want to hear your
right.
story. They don't. That is the gosh honest truth. I love what Stop Abuse Now and others, what you're doing, others are doing, and there's a lot of great organizations, there's a lot of great advocates, but in the greater scheme of things, you go to the cancer walk on a Sunday. There's all kinds of people. You go to the local sexual assault, domestic violence walk. If they get a couple hundred, they're doing good.
Right, right, right. Wow. I just got to go back because I'm thinking about your songs right now, and I think that there is the whole combination of the music, the lyrics, and your voice. And I find that when I go back and revisit some of the songs that have been really weighing on my mind is like, where are they? The Warrior, of course. If I Could Love You, Train of Tears, of course, Dear Child. Oh my God. And Walk With Me. I go back and I can listen to them again and again, and I get something totally different. And I think that there's such, like you said, hope in these songs. And through your voice, it's like, I know I'm going to be okay. And we talk about trauma as being, oh, we so many times design are not designed, but put it in labels. This is some type of trauma. This is a different type of trauma. Trauma is trauma. And the brain doesn't really care how it happened, but your songs affect anyone, any person that went through any type of trauma, losing a loved one, a car accident or anything like this. Um, I just want to say how incredible those are. And I just want everybody to go listen to your music. I really am pushing people, please go listen because it's incredible. And he's an artist and it's healing. When I'm listening to your music, I feel healed. So thank
Thank
you for that.
Oh, thank
And
you.
when you think about this, what do you want listeners to take away from these amazing creative works that you have, these lyrics, the music itself, and your voice? What do you want them to walk away from with?
The three-legged stool since I started with this has always been hope, healing, and help. And when I'm writing songs, that is, so I'm not sitting down. It just comes out organically. I can be thinking about something. A song may come up a year later, but what comes out of my thoughts. So it's a form of advocacy. It's a form of me expressing my own feelings. But you mentioned Train of Tears. That is my story, but it's the collective stories of the hundreds of people that I've met or read about, that also have been on their own train of tears. And I was inspired to write that song because when I thought of the Trail of Tears, we've been on our own journey of tears because of, as you said, and I'm the same, I feel the same way, that I had the physical, emotional, sexual abuse and neglect going on in my life, but someone who's lost someone to cancer, trauma is trauma, and it's impacting. It's when I started learning. I can't repeat back to you all the things, let the doctors do that or the psychologists, but recognizing that trauma is impacting the neural pathways. I say it rewired our nervous system. Our brain didn't develop, but that's where music and healing, all the creative arts are healing. That's why they have found those of us as survivors, we intrinsically know what we need to do, whether it's dance, movement, all these different things. It's getting it out there, and that's we need to move. We need to be moving. We need to be listening, connecting with other people, and the creative arts is such a powerful way to do that. So for me as a musician, I I have a message that I'm saying in the lyrics, but I also want the listener to let it let it speak to them. I'm not going to tell someone this is how you need to hear it. You apply it to what you hear, because the same thing when I hear the Beatles, and I may read later on that they were trying to say this, and I was hearing something totally
Totally
different.
different.
So
Yeah,
the same with I'm just grateful that people will listen, and I do make it a point to post the lyrics. So if I record something on YouTube, the lyrics are posted underneath. I still, I released 3 CDs. The lyrics are in the jacket. You know, I put them also on my website. If someone downloads a song and, because I'm on Spotify and all those different things, the Amazon stuff, if they want the lyrics, write to me and I'll send them to you.
that's beautiful. That's incredible. I also just wanted to add that whole thing about moving, wanting to move as survivors need to move. They also need to live. You know what I mean? And I think that that's a different meaning. Each person has their own meaning of what living is. But when we allow ourselves to go and listen to music or whatever, our bodies take over. And I love that. Now you use the image of trains in several titles of your albums. Does trains have a specific meaning or symbolization for you?
They do. So, as I mentioned, I lived in the projects of Cambridge for a
Hmm.
couple of years. Um, and there was this chain link fence, which kids learned to climb over or climb through or cut and get over. But there was the train tracks and the trains rolling, and then some were going through. I was too young at that time, 4 and 5 and 6. I saw the older kids, climbing up on them as they're slowly moving through. But I would climb up onto that box car, and I'm like, oh my gosh, these things are big. They're much bigger than they see on TV. And then with my friend Freddie and the other, I'm forgetting his name, I think it was John, and they're pushing me. Come on, Mike, you can do it and jump. And then you're jumping over. I'm thinking they showed the old westerns, the cowboys and robbers. There's a big gap there when you're just a little. But I felt alive on top of that train, just that boxcar, and so we'd play there. Years later, so we moved out of Cambridge when I was 6, and I remember going to the school in Cambridge where I was going to start at 10. Next thing I know, I'm going to elementary school in Billerica. Behind the woods that I used to hide out in and build my tree fort and all the rest of that, my bridges over the streams, was the B&M railroad yard. That's where I got most of my wood to build my tree fort. So if they're looking for me, here I am. in their scrapyard. Uh, so I would climb up on those trains, and then some of them are starting to go out of the yard. And I remember as a young boy, I just loved it. It was because it's only going real slow going out of the yard, but when you're a kid, it's like it feels like it's going 90 miles an hour, but it's not. But I always wanted to stay on that train, John Michael, and I always thought because it was the Boston and Maine railroad, and I was hoping that they were going to go to Canada, and I always felt that the Royal Mounted Canadian Police would take care of me. But I'd always
Oh,
climb down as it started to get going a little faster because I then knew I'm not going to get off this. If this speeds up, I'm going to die. So I would climb down and jump off, but I just had thoughts for years. I always thought I was a coward for not riding that and packing my clothes to go to Canada. Because I didn't know if the train was going to Canada. I saw Canada on some of the boxcars, so I assumed that's where they were going. So that, and there was something about trains. I just, there's something about them. They were powerful, but they were a means of travel. They're a means of getting away. So trains for me. So later on, I'm playing in a band called Train in England. It's like this was cool.
oh my God. I love that. That imagery is just brilliant. I think it's amazing. Now, I want to ask you about how did this surviving spirit materialize?
When I'm angry at the mental health centers for they're trauma informed, but they're not trauma practicing. But within that, there are people, but they're in the system. So it's more looking at the diagnosis. But when I first started going, this was 93, 94, 95. What I was amazed at is, so this is my first foray into this. I'm 39, 40, 41, 42. But I'd ask questions and oh, I don't know. They didn't know about Stop Abuse Now. They didn't even know about NAMI or Mental Health America or other things. And I'm like, I'm not saying this to them, but I'm thinking, this is insane. You're supposed to be helping us heal. Why aren't you providing us with resources to find peer support or organizations or websites or books to read? And it's like you're on your own. So the surviving spirit initially was called Survivor Friends and Friends of Survivors. And then it
Mm,
morphed into Surviving Spirit. And all I was trying to do was to share resources. So, like Zero Abuse Project, all the other organizations, all the mental health organizations. But I also, a key to all of this was always sharing if I heard of someone wrote a book, someone's an artist who's dealt with trauma or mental health, whatever. Maybe they weren't calling them podcasts back then, a radio interview or something. I would share that. So I took my anger and frustration and I was trying to create my own little thing to share resources to share with people. And it just morphed from a few hundred, then it was several hundred to years later, several thousand. And it goes all over. Every now and then I get a thing from someone in Africa or Asia, and it's like, wow, that's pretty cool because people share it. So it really was, John Michael, just to share resource, to share again, there's hope, there's healing and help. And I've always been inclusive. And I'd have friends in the past who were sexual abuse survivors say, "Oh, Michael, you need to focus more on that." I go, "No, I'm focusing on trauma, just trauma, abuse, and mental health. Those three words cover a big spectrum. And as you said earlier, there's loss. What if someone's dealing with grief? You don't have to have a childhood of abuse. And I'd love to see the world someday that we don't have that. But there's other traumas, there's bullying, there's all kinds of different things. So I've always tried, and so years later, sharing, folks in the gay, trans, all that stigma and discrimination. So I'll share if an organization or website, it again, it's inclusive. Whatever, if someone's being hurt or they have loss or pain, I just want to share hope and healing and help with that. That's really how that was the genesis of that.
and you are doing that.
I
I
still
just
do
want you to
that.
know that.
Yeah.
And I take a little moment and talk about One in Six, that organization and your participation in it, because now One in Six is part of the Zero Abuse Project, which is kind of cool. It kind of is interesting that that's been picked up here. But what is your experience with that and the project that you worked on?
Well, when they first came into being, because I knew some of the folks who were on the founding members and board people. So, you'd get the email. And so once it opened, I was like, wow, this is great. And initially they had the Blue String Project. So they would send you a blue E string. So for many years, I had a blue E string on my guitar. It was to make awareness of that One in Six. So it was, so I did that. But I just loved what they were doing because they had the organizational skills and funding to take it to a larger level than what I was trying to do. I was just trying to raise some awareness. So I just loved what they were doing, reaching out to fellow survivors. Then, a few years later, David Lezak comes along and starts the Bristlecone Project, which was housed in that. And I just felt honored as all heck because I was always aware of David Lezak. That was so cool as my advocacy and One in Six stuff. Getting to meet people and the authors of books or their professor, and I've read their research study or something. I started meeting all the people that I was reading all their works, and it's just like they're just down to earth people. They're wonderful human beings. So to have David Lezak come to my house and spend time with me, and we go out in the backyard and he takes the pictures, and I shared a lot with him. And then as he did with all of us, he was able to shrink that down into this little powerful 3, 4, 5 paragraph. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. Then later on, he started doing the videos with it. I was in the initial part, it was just pictures. But again, then it gives you, because then you're starting to connect with other survivors through emails, sometimes with phone calls, but there's this peer support community, and we're not in touch with each other all the time, but you get to know people all over. And as I mentioned earlier, Bristlecone Project we have our own private Facebook group. So when people are down out or if they're sharing something good, they post that. So I loved everything about what One in Six was trying to do, what they were saying, and also with the Bristlecone Project because they were putting our humanity front and center, especially with the Bristlecone. They were showing us as human beings and what this has done to us. But darn it, not only did we survive, but we've learned to thrive.
Yes, and the other thing that's really important about that, it was focusing on male survivors,
Yes.
which was way ahead of its time because
Yes.
we're still not hearing enough voices about that. I do have another question from the chat for you. This is from Hawa. If your songs could speak directly to another survivor today, what would you want it to say to them?
There is healing, but it's going to take time. And the only true person who can help you heal is yourself. It's the hard work of that. I know a lot of folks, they expect that the counselor, the therapist, the psychologist, psychiatrist, the peer support groups are going to heal them. They're a part of your community. They're part of your family. But the work is here. Now, my path and your path, even though it's similar, I know for myself it was to read everything and anything I could get my hands on about trauma, abuse, and mental health. I mean, my library is immense. What I've borrowed from the library is, reading. I still read articles daily or at nightly on the web about stuff. So there is hope, there is healing, but it's going to take time. And depending on the severity of the abuse or the trauma in your life, now the complex PTSD, that's going to take time. But I do believe there is healing for all of us, and I see it within myself that I'm in a better space. I'm at peace. I have joy. I have love in my life. I have found safety. We need safety. That's key. You need safety in your life to do that, but you can do it. And I feel that you deserve it and you're worth it. So it's hard work, but take breaks.
Mm.
Do a little self-care. To try to tackle all this, which I made a mistake in the first few years. I tried to do everything. I was seeing two counselors, and they, because I thought, well, if I see two, it'll go quicker. But
Right.
they didn't know that I was seeing two. But so you can also overwhelm yourself. So you have to take this in bites at a time. Self-care, because you know, it gets overwhelming. So when it's overwhelming, take a break. And your body, the mind, the spirit will tell you when it's overwhelming. And yeah, I'm not of the mindset, oh, you got to push through that. Well, yeah, when I used to hike mountains, I had to push through that. But healing trauma was a lot harder. I used to wrestle. I've been in fights. I've been in the ring. I've hiked some severe mountain. I'd go out with a backpack for 6 or 7 days. That was it. And my tent up there. Healing the trauma in my life was a lot harder. So be mindful of that. But you can do it. But again, you're conditioning yourself and just take it in steps.
And be gentle with yourself,
Be gentle.
because
Self-care.
you can be. Yeah. All right. Just one little political type question I want to ask. What are some of your concerns that our society is facing today?
The polarization. I hope I don't get you folks in trouble, but the whole anti um, DEI, because you're asking me, that to
Right.
me is silencing. We're talking as fellow survivors of trauma. We were sexually abused, and we don't need only look at the silence of society. I feel the other things where they're trying to quash people talking about their past, whether it was, the genocide of Native Americans here,
Mhm.
slavery, genocide of uh, the Jewish population in World War II, just all the different conflicts going on when they're trying to silence that and they're saying they're anti that, I just see that as a bigger picture. It's the same thing as those of us who would be silenced when we were going to the mental health center and we wanted to talk about what happened to us in the past, and they're saying, that's in the past, you need to get over it, you need to move on. Well, that's what society and a lot of these politicians are saying right now. Oh, that's in the past, you need to get over that. Well, yeah, it is in the past, but if it's been the trauma has been passed down through the ages in the DNA, so that's we need to be able to talk about this.
Mhm.
What was it? Archbishop Desmond Tutu. He spoke of there was a power in healing and sharing the story, and I'm not I'm misquoting him, but he talked of how when apartheid was finally stopped, and then they were able to start telling their stories. That's how that nation was able to heal itself from the trauma and the abuse of apartheid all those years. If they were being told don't talk about, which had been happening for years, because when you're sitting with that stuff, that's where all the ulcers come from, and heart disease, diabetes,
Mhm.
cancer. So whatever someone's particular hurts, they need to be able to address that and society and open. Because yes, it's hard to and it'd be hard to hear what you and I experienced as children or teens, but it was a lot harder for you and I and the other survivors. We got through it. You can get through a 2 minute talk on raising awareness on child abuse or any other abuse or trauma. You'll be okay. You'll survive.
Wow. Thank you so much. That means so much. You're so right. I have we could do this all day. I know, and our time is almost up, but here's one thing I would like to ask you. Is there anything that you would like to add that we have not touched upon yet?
For me in the healing, I don't need to fight anymore. I'm not promiscuous. I'm monogamous and if I'm in a relationship because I didn't know. I didn't know back then. I've always loved my children, but I always had to be on the go to provide for them. I've learned now it's just being with them. That's all they want, the time. It's time with my friends. I used to visit fellow survivors, and I'd stay for the cup of coffee or a cup of tea. Then I had to get going. Because I never felt good inside. Now I can sit with people and just have conversations about anything and everything. I have conversations with the cashier with people. I- I'm happy. I'm happy, John Michael. I have love in my heart. I'm angry at people. I don't, I used to hate my parents. I don't like what they did. I dislike them. I don't feel I need to forgive them, but I have empathy for them for what they went through as children. So my purpose on this earth is to try to break that silence so it doesn't keep going. I want to be part of breaking the cycle. And I'm in a better place. I write songs now that talk about love and life. I talk about just loving people, just being. I wrote a song, thanking my fellow peers, whether it was in the mental health community, sexual abuse community, music. Just, I'm giving thanks. I'm thankful. I'm grateful that I have a roof over my head. I'm grateful I have food. My bills are paid. I'm grateful. I'm glad I survived. I'm glad I'm here.
And we are too,
Yeah, thanks.
because you're changing the world.
Yeah.
And I love it. And I just want to also tell everybody, if you get a chance, you and your daughter sing duets, and they're beautiful. The blending of the voices is just unbelievable. I really, I hope everybody who's listening will go listen to your music, because it's just incredible and it will change your life.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you again so much, Michael. This is too short of a time. I think we're going to have to figure out to do something more. Um, but let's bring